from Paul Emily, and it's a very simple question. Is it legal to sell my RDP? So this is a very, very interesting conversation. So yeah, did you want to start it off?
Yeah, so as much as that's a simple question, the answer is unfortunately immensely complicated.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, it's really going to depend on the circumstances. Okay. There are a couple of hard and fast rules which you should know about when it comes to your RDP housing. So the first thing is the law prohibits the sale of an RDP housing by an owner within the first 8 years of occupancy. Okay. That is without the permission of the Department of Housing. So there is a possibility you can get permission to do it, but strictly the law says you cannot sell your property within the first 8 years of occupancy of the RDP house. Okay. Now remember, RDP housing is a very interesting thing in our country because people who occupy the RDP houses are deemed to be the owners. Now, government is very slow about getting title deeds out to those particular owners. While people are occupying the properties, but they are technically the owners and those properties are registered in their name. But there is that limitation on their ability to sell the property for the 8-year period. Okay. After the 8 years, that limitation no longer exists and the property can be sold on by the owner of the property. Okay. However, there is a sneaky little provision in law which does also require a owner of an RDP house to offer it back to the state first before they sell it on. Okay. Now, this is one of those things in law where it's in law and that's what the requirement is. In practice, it's a very rare occasion that we see something like this happen, but technically the legislation does require you to offer it back to the state before you can go ahead and sell on the particular property. So after that 8-year period, you do have the ability. One final thing, which I think it should really be mentioned and should be kept in mind, is obviously when it comes to RDP housing, we're talking about the most vulnerable people in our society. So it's very rare that we find people who are trying to sell their RDP house coming to an attorney and incurring attorney's fees or conveyancing fees to go through this transfer process. But unfortunately, that's something that has to happen. Okay, there's a very established practice within South Africa where affidavits are signed, where it says that I have sold this person, I've sold this house to this other person, and it's all encapsulated within that affidavit. And while that affidavit may be helpful in a legal proceeding or to enforce a transfer of a property, that affidavit is not a transfer of the property itself. And it's really, you've got to be careful. You've got to go through, a registry in order to transfer a property effectively from one person to another. And part of that process is obviously having the title deed to the property. Okay, so for those people who, obviously this question relates to can I sell, but for people who might be looking to purchase an RDP house, make sure that you've seen a title deed or the seller of the particular property does in fact have the title deed, so that you know that they're in the position to actually sell the property. And then again, do the research. If you're going to engage in this type of transaction and see, have they owned the property for a period of 8 years, so you know that there's an ability for them to do so. Because unfortunately, if you do purchase an RDP house and it's before the 8-year period, or the seller didn't go and offer it to state beforehand, or they don't have the title deed, it does unfortunately put your ownership of the property at risk, because it will be an illegal transaction. And if the state did intend to do so, they could come along and try and set aside that particular transfer as an illegal transaction. So look, whether that will ultimately be set aside, well, that's a question for a full court proceeding, and there's a lot of case law surrounding that particular issue and what transactions can be set aside and what can't. But you don't want to sit in a situation where you have to go through that process in any event. So do your research, make sure you watch out for those particular things, and just keep yourself safe on that side.
So some of the common scenarios that I've experienced when it comes to RDP housing goes exactly along the same lines that you've been discussing, and it's a misunderstanding of our deed registry and our property ownership and registration process. So for the sake of the viewers and anyone watching this video, South Africa actually has a very advanced registry of property ownerships. And it's relied upon because in the past, in many other countries, even to this day in some countries, people don't know who owns the property. And there's this confusion because this guy has a title deed, that guy has a fraudulent title deed, and it's very confusing. And this is almost like a central registration of what belongs to who. And if it doesn't reflect there, it's almost prima facie proof. It's on the face of it proof that you're not owner, and you'd have to go above and beyond to make sure that the ownership rights are actually affected. But until your name is on that title deed, it doesn't fly. So it seems like an encumbering thing to have. Especially for people that don't want to pay transfer costs and things like that. But remember the benefit of knowing that all you have to do is go to one place and you can show yourself as the owner. And so now this brings to the second part of the conversation is what are the scenarios we typically experience? It goes back to something Nick said, where there's this practice to sign an affidavit and say, well, you know what? We transfer ownership by way of an affidavit. The affidavit almost acting like a deed of sale. Right, for all intents and purposes, the commissioning, not being consequential. So now we've got a deed of sale saying, I'm buying the property from you. We've got no effective transfer. We don't know whether formalities were met or not. And obviously now the deeds office doesn't reflect it. So what have we found is the issue is this property goes and gets sold on to somebody else. Because remember, this guy actually has a title deed, or you can prove that his name is on that title deed through going on the system. So he goes to purchase a B, he goes to purchase a C, and he sells his property 5 times over. And now it lands up not you fighting the seller to take transfer, but you fighting 5 other purchasers as to who came first in law. But if he's more entitled than I am, can I claim my money back? And especially with RDP, we find that people never pay everything up front at once. So I paid a deposit of 100,000 Rand, and next year I was going to pay another 100 and another 100 and another 100. So some sellers generally think, oh, but you missed the payment. I'm selling it off to somebody else. I'm not giving you the money back. And now you sit in a fight going, give me transfer. No, you're in breach. You didn't pay me the full purchase price. Okay, give me my money back. I don't have the money anymore. And that's pretty much what we're looking at. So rather just follow the process. Yes, it might be a bit of a cost, but at least it's secure. It's better than paying 100,000 Rand and never seeing it.
Oh, yeah, no, agreed. It's a tricky little area of law, but I really think trying to get some legal advice, on your specific situation, really is the right way to go in those particular circumstances.
Absolutely.